Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsey, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm great, Brian. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to all our HorseCenter viewers.
Happy Valentine's Day, Matt. You know what that means? That means we're getting ever closer to the Kentucky Derby. And you know what, Matt? For the first time, I know we've been talking about it for a little while now, but for the first time, I really feel like the Kentucky Derby Trail is heating up. It's heating up quickly in the next few weeks. That's what our show is going to be about mostly today, folks. We are going to preview some big Kentucky Derby preps on the horizon. Saturday in New Orleans, Monday in Arkansas. We got the Grade 2 Risen Star, Matt. Let's start with that because that is the first championship series. We got some big points on the line in Risen Star, and we have a rematch between Instilled Regard and Principe Guillermo.
What could be better than that, Brian? You know, we're going down to New Orleans. Instilled Regard, Principe Guillermo. They went at it last time. Maybe Instilled Regard had a little bit of a better trip in that race. Principe Guillermo was way on the outside, and but still made a nice rally in there. Two really good horses, but coming in there, we've got another one of those Todd Pletcher lightly raced runners, another one of those coming off an allowance race, and they've done pretty well lately, Brian. Audible took the Holy Bull. Vino Rosso ran a really nice race in Sam F. Davis at Tampa Bay. We got to expect Noble Indy to run a good one in here also.
Can't disagree with you, Matt. Pletcher being Pletcher, but let's get back to that LeCompte that was run down in New Orleans last month, because I think these are two really, really good horses. Snapper Sinclair is third. I don't have him quite in the same hierarchy of Derby contenders yet, Matt. In fact, I think he might be better on turf in the long run. But as far as the top two, Instilled Regard, he was $1 million purchase earlier in his career. The son of Arch, really, he ran some good sprint races early in his career against some talented horses and was competitive. But then when he stretched out for his last three, he's taken it up a notch for trainer Jerry Hollendorfer. His trip, his import into Louisiana from California was most impressive. And I tell you what he did, too, besides being a horse, I think that's only going to get better as distances get longer, and showed a lot of talent in winning that LeCompte Easy. He was the horse that gave Principe Guillermo the tougher trip by beating him to the punch on the first turn and pushing Principe Guillermo even farther wide. They both came from outside posts that day. Having said that, I think Principe Guillermo, third race of his life, that was a very good effort considering what happened to him going into the first turn and how wide and how far back he got pushed. Never a match for Instilled Regard after that, but a very good effort from the Asmussen runner.
Yeah, and Steve Asmussen's starting to crank up his barn on the Derby Trail. Again, Principe is breaking from the outside, this time from the 10 hole. It's not as big a field, Brian. So hopefully it won't be as big a factor. But once again, the speed in the race is going to be inside him. Snapper Sinclair, also from the Asmussen barn, I expect to be running out in front. And maybe Noble Indy will be out there also, which means that they'll have to make a little decision with Principe, who will be ridden by Florent Giroux of Gunrunner fame with Steve Asmussen. Will they try and gun out of there and stay with them, or run a nice stalking position? I kind of see both Instilled Regard and Principe getting a nice setup in that kind of position and making their runs. It sets up to be a really interesting stretch duel.
Absolutely, Matt. And I think Florent Giroux, the French import, one of the best jockeys now in America, will not let Principe Guillermo have the trip that he did in the LeCompte. So I think that makes this a tougher race for Instilled Regard, who really was an impressive winner of the LeCompte. Going back over to the horse you were talking about quite a bit, Noble Indy, a son of Take Charge Indy, was just most impressive, winning his maiden race. I tell you what, I was a little disappointed. The margin of victory in his second race out, it was an allowance race at Gulfstream Park. But looking back at that race and the horse that he had to work to beat, Mississippi, looks like both horses ran well. Noble Indy looked to have him the entire stretch, but Mississippi was very game. Probably a really good tightener, probably a really good lesson, good experience for Noble Indy. I would expect him, as Pletcher so often do at this stage of their early on in their careers, to move forward. Noble Indy then becomes the obvious third choice or the obvious one of the top three to beat in here. And what'd you think of that race at Gulfstream? Is Noble Indy maybe an Audible type? Can he pop up as big as Audible did just recently?
You can't figure that there isn't a good chance of that. Pletcher recently said that he likes this horse and he sees this horse as one that is going to appreciate more distance down the road, which wasn't necessarily what everybody thought looking at his pedigree. But I'm going to go with Pletcher, and anytime one of his horses gets in a stretch battle, it's hard to go away from them because he trains them from the beginning to be good competitors. So I don't know. I see this as a 3-horse race, but Instilled Regard and Principe maybe have a little bit on the experience side. But if I got to pick, I think I'm going to stick with Hollendorfer and Instilled Regard.
Absolutely, and that was my pick in the Lecomte, so I'm not getting off him, but I think this is a good test for him. Noble Indy, a son of Take Charge Indy, very well-bred horse who didn't quite get a completely healthy career. Otherwise, we might have seen more from Take Charge Indy as a racehorse. Now I think he becomes a very interesting sire, Noble Indy being probably the most talented one we've seen yet, so interesting. There are some other good horses in here, Matt. It's the big three, but there's others, and one I should mention comes from the Michael Stidham barn. That's Supreme Aura, son of Candy Ride of Gun Runner fame. Supreme Aura has really dominated in his first 2 starts, but a big step up, not only in distance, but in class for him. So the Risen Star big points race, Saturday, it's already been drawn. We look forward to the Risen Star for sure. But then Monday, there's reasons to like what we see coming out of Arkansas. Now, this race won't be drawn till the end of the week, but the Southwest Stakes, $500,000. There's some very interesting horses there. And just like in New Orleans, some interesting trainers with Pletcher and Asmussen, and even Coach D. Wayne Lucas bringing some big guns to Arkansas.
Yep, the coach has got probably his best shot for another Derby win in several years with Sporting Chance in the race. Sporting Chance was last seen back in the summer winning the Hopeful Stakes, and enjoy the replay, folks, of this, especially as they get closer to the wire. This was a little bit of a green Sporting Chance coming down the stretch. Maybe he was shying away from the whip a little bit, but within a shadow of the wire, you'll see him really bear out and several paths, but he still was able to hang on. And shortly after that, they found some chips in his knees that needed to be removed. So he's been off since then, but flashed an awful lot of talent in there. But it's not going to be an easy spot to come in off of a layoff.
Yeah, that Hopeful was an extremely interesting race, to say the least. The Sporting Chance ran a couple of maiden races here. It looked very good, running second and then winning out here in Kentucky. And then he got to Saratoga for the biggest 2-year-old race at Saratoga, the Grade 1 Hopeful. There were some good horses in there, Matt. Free Drop Billy being one, Frenzy Fire another one. And Sporting Chance really looked like he had taken over the race late. As you said, he really went out, broke outward, and I think he just leveled off in the last couple strides to get the win. Otherwise, straightened up. Otherwise, he was going to get beat after looking home free, even 50 yards from the wire. So Sporting Chance, a very interesting horse. Yeah, Lucas has been down this road many times before. Sporting Chance has been working well in Arkansas, so I think Sporting Chance Even though it's a long layoff, I think he certainly has a chance here. But the son of Tisnow probably also is looking at this race as a springboard to bigger things to come. And he seems like a horse. He's been one I've really been waiting for. He seems like a horse who could very well have bigger things to come. We're expecting a big field in the Southwest, Matt. It could even be that they draw 2 divisions of this race. If not, it'll be a big full field. Some of the other big names, I think we got to talk about the top 2 that were coming out of the Smarty Jones. And again, that's Baffert and Asmussen.
Yeah. If we remember back to the Smarty Jones, it was Mourinho coming in for Baffert, and he just dominated that race every step of the way. He got loose on the lead, relaxed out there. Some of us were questioning whether he could get the distance, but that was no factor in there because he was on cruise control and took care of that race. But combatant for Steve Asmussen, who had finished second in the Springboard Mile earlier, came back in here and ran a nice race against the pace advantage that Mourinho had. He made a nice closing move and put a big gap between himself and the rest of the field.
Absolutely. Combatant is a horse that I think we should look at a little bit. My guess is he's not quite grade 1 level. He's not quite a type of horse that's going to win the Kentucky Derby. But on the other hand, I thought he ran on very well. Marino, as you said, couldn't have been any looser on the lead in the Smarty Jones and really dominated the race. No one was going to catch him that day with the race setup as it was. But Combatant ran another good race, an improved race. I think he's getting better. I think that makes him a real threat in the Southwest. I imagine the pace will be tougher. It almost has to be tougher for Marino this time. By the way, Matt, I'm on record as saying I don't like Marino at all as far as a Kentucky Derby horse. But don't confuse my feelings for this horse because I think Marino is a really, really talented horse. I just believe from everything I've seen that he is more of a one-turn horse. And I think Marino's future will be as a top-class sprinter. Horses have done well in races like this, mile 16th races. At Oaklawn Park, for instance, Secret Circle, Baffert did it. And, of course, that horse ended up being more of a sprinter than a 2-turn horse. I think that's Marino's future. But having said that, mile 16th on Monday, certainly he can be dangerous once again. I think he's got that much speed and talent. Speaking of speed and talent, Matt, there's other horses in here. We really don't know how good they are, and there's been a lot of talk. A couple I'm going to throw out here. One from Asmussen, Retirement Fund, and another Baffert that we've been waiting to come back, and that's Zulfikar, a son of Bodemeister. Retirement Fund is the son of Eskenderea. 2 good young sires, 2 interesting horses. They're going to probably be thrown. We expect them to be thrown in the mix in Monday's Southwest.
Yeah, Retirement Fund is 2 for 2 in his career with a maiden win and an allowance win, and hasn't done anything wrong. We can also throw in there that 7 Trumpets is a possible from the Dale Romans barn, and 7 Romans made a really nice showing of himself, finishing second in the Jerome, and maybe this is one from the Romans barn who's going to develop along the trail. Looks like he can handle the distance nicely also.
Absolutely. Now the Southwest it actually has more money, that $500,000 purse. It's a grade 3. It isn't one of the championship series, so it's only 10 points available for the winner. So not quite the points of the Risen Star, but Arkansas has proven to be a very fertile ground on the Kentucky Derby Trail, especially in recent years. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on the Southwest on Monday. And my favorite prep of the weekend is that Risen Star with Instilled Regard, Principe Guillermo, and Noble Indy leading the way. Let's look back a little bit, Matt, though. Last week we saw a couple possible Kentucky Derby preps. One is a point race, one is not. Let's start with the points race, 2-turn race. That was at Tampa Bay Downs. It was the Sam F. Davis. It featured the return of that really good turf horse who freaked a little bit on dirt in his dirt debut, won the Remsen. I'm talking about Catholic Boy. Catholic Boy was the favorite, but he couldn't get the first place prize last Saturday in the Sam F. Davis.
No, he sure couldn't. He ran into a horse named Flame Away coming from the Mark Cassie barn. A terrific horse, really versatile with wins on the synthetic, on the turf, on the wet, on a sloppy track, on a muddy track. He tried the dirt before, didn't have a really good trip that day, got a lot of kickback. So Mark Cassie was willing to take another shot with him on the dry dirt at Tampa, and that was sure a good decision. It was a small field, and once again, we're going to say it, when a horse gets loose on the lead, as Flame Away did, they get brave, and Flame Away is already a gutsy horse. A lot of wins, 5 wins out of 7 starts, I think, and that is a terrific career already. Again, probably not a horse that I like to be a contender in the Kentucky Derby, but certainly a horse that I'd love to own.
Absolutely, Matt. Flame Away, I feel the same. He's not a horse I'm really thinking the Son of Scott Daddy is going to be a type of horse that can win the Derby. But wow, he's won stakes sprinting. He's won stakes going a route of ground. As you said, mud, turf, fast dirt. Now, Flame Away, obviously a game horse too. Probably helped out a little bit by the race day scratch of Vouch, who would have added some speed to the CMF Davis. Catholic Boy, you know, the favorite, the clear favorite in the CMF Davis, coming first race since the Remsen, had his chance at Flame Away. Far turn early in the stretch. Flame Away was not going to let him by there on the rail. I'm not sure if that's a disappointment for Catholic Boy. It's a decent return. I think you liked him a little bit more as a Derby horse than I did going in. I don't think either of us are proven right or proven wrong by what he did in the CMF Davis. It was a solid performance by Catholic Boy. Maybe some fans of his were hoping for a little bit better. But I tell you, Matt, the third place horse interests me a lot. We knew it going in. Another lightly raced Pletcher. Just like we were talking about Noble Indy, Vino Rosso was 2 for 2 coming in, hadn't tested stakes waters yet. And it seemed to be kind of just hanging out there in the stretch for a long time. But he really leveled off, laid it down late stretch, was picking up ground on the leaders late, and then really, take the gallop out for what it's worth. But he looked like a horse screaming for more distance, and also a horse with a lot of talent. This is a son of Curlin, making only his 3rd lifetime start. And the closing third in the CMF Davis makes me think that Vino Rosso is a horse that we will be hearing more and more from.
Yeah, looks like a horse that will gain valuable experience from that race. Kind of looked like a horse that was not quite sure about what he should be doing in the race. But like you said, he got rolling down the stretch, which certainly points to good things down the Derby Trail to Churchill Downs and the rest of the Triple Crown.
Absolutely. So that was the CMF Davis. Meanwhile, out in California, Southern California, at Santa Anita, there was the 7-furlong San Vicente. Lots of Kentucky Derby horses of past years have run in this race. It's not a Derby points race because of the distance. Just a few years ago, in fact, Nyquist and Exaggerator were featured in the San Vicente. I don't know if we have any Derby horses coming out of this race, but it was an interesting race. I was lucky enough to make Kantaka my top pick on my blog last week. I didn't think he'd go off at the odds he did, 11-1, but it really turned out that he was benefited, as it looked on paper he might be, by a super fast pace. That developed, and Kantaka came rolling down the lane to win the San Vicente pretty easily for trainer Jerry Hollendorfer.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the races that we've talked about today have been really textbook races with the loose on the lead horses. And now we're talking about a race here that was just loaded with speed. And some of these youngsters went out and knocked heads and weren't ready to parcel out their speed yet, and they just went at it. And anytime, I don't care what kind of horses are in the race, anytime you see a 44 fraction for half mile, you're most likely not going to be around at the end of a 7-furlong race, and that's exactly what happened. Ken Thacker picked up the pieces for West Point Thoroughbreds, which is having a great spring, by the way, and blew by those horses. Great and a very nice performance, but as we're saying, got the absolute perfect setup. It was one turn, so it'll be interesting to see what Ken Thacker can do in his next start on the Derby Trail.
Absolutely, Matt. And behind him, we need to talk about some highly regarded Bafferts. First off, Axeman was a heavy favorite of just a giant debut win. Axeman was odds on in here. Axeman was down on the rail, and he was smothered by Mr. Jägermeister early. Yeah, you mentioned the 44 fraction for a half mile in a 7-furlong race, but more than that, they were going head and head. This horse was down on the rail. If you liked Axeman going in, please don't give up on him after this performance because, as Matt said, it's just not a performance where a win is going to come from what happened to him early. Axeman, he got his goose cooked by Mr. Jägermeister. Enough said on that. Nero stalked that really fast pace and held on pretty well. He was around for second. Another one from the Baffert barn. No match for Kantaka late, but certainly much the best of the rest. I would say, Matt, that none of the three strike me as I need to have them in the top 10 on my Kentucky Derby list right now. But on the other hand, none of the three are horses that I don't want to see more from and wouldn't be surprised if they can do things stretching out. Axeman, with all that speed, I think he needs to learn a lesson or two, and he'll find distance races where there's just not much speed at all, where he can probably dominate. But I want to see all three down the road.
Yep, I agree with that, Brian.
All right, Matt. So we've been talking all about 3-year-old colts. How about some champions? How about some Eclipse Award winners? How about some champions making their first start of the year? No disappointments either in Tampa Bay or in Santa Anita. Let's start with the turf. World Approval became a monster when Mark Cassie's barn decided to keep him at middle distances last year. 3 decisive Grade 1 victories to close out the year, including the Breeders' Cup Mile at Del Mar. First race back, World Approval passes the test, giving weight in the Tampa Bay Stakes.
Yeah, let me just start out by saying thank you to Mark Cassie and to Jerry Hollendorf for putting their champions out on the track in February. I love that we get to see them run at this point. And back to World Approval, he ran a really nice race coming off of the layoff from the Breeders' Cup. Got into a battle down the stretch and handled it very well. Pulled off to a half length, 3/4 of a length victory in there. And fans need to keep in mind that World Approval is not the kind of horse that you see in races winning by 3 or 4 lengths. He's a veteran. He knows what he needs to do, and when he gets in a battle, he once again showed that he's going to win that battle.
Absolutely. He's a winner, Matt. World Approval, son of Northern Fleet, and the absolute fantastic broodmare Win Approval. I saw a few people disappointed by this victory. Didn't win by enough, but I just don't see it. I don't agree with that thought at all. This is a race that builds to bigger and better things. They don't want to use up World Approval all in his first start of the year in a smaller stakes race at Tampa Bay. Gave weight, wasn't going to let the horse by him ever, is my feeling, and World Approval was best. Bigger and better things coming. We thought it might be Dubai for the 9-furlong, the $6 million Dubai turf. They've decided to keep him stateside, keep him at a mile. Makes sense to me, but I think he's only going to get better. Just kind of like Tepin in recent years. Cassie's been blessed with these fantastic milers. Tepin got better as the year went on. Look for World Approval. Now 6 to do it again this year. Speaking of better, last year was a little bit of a tough year for Unique Bell. It's funny saying that because she ended up winning the female sprint Eclipse Award, but she lost some time when they brought her back after the physical setback. She was kept sprinting. Disappointed in the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Turf. Won really nicely to end out the year though in the Grade 1 La Brea. I never thought Unique Bella was just a sprinter. We saw a little bit of that in the Santa Maria this weekend as well, Saturday, with just a dominating win in the Santa Maria. But on the other hand, there was very little to keep her company early, Matt.
Yes, and she did absolutely everything smartly and correctly in there in that small field. She got out to the lead and just started cruising, and she looked so powerful and confident out there on the racetrack, and doesn't matter who she's running against in that race. When you see that kind of performance, the stride and the class, you know that she's really comfortable going around two turns. And like you mentioned before, when you've got a horse like that has speed going short and sprinting, and they get into those distance races where the fractions are not going to be hot, she can cruise. And we look for good things from Unique Bella as the year goes on. And once again, at this time of year, we've said it a lot of times the last few years, the older female division is kind of loaded again.
That's right, Matt. Unique Bella has kind of thrown down the gauntlet in what I think should be a very interesting division. Now, getting back to the Santa Maria a little bit, Mopetism second, Majestic Heat third. Majestic Heat was with Unique Bella for maybe a furlong or so early. These are good mares. These are good mares. And when I say good, I mean, you know, grade 3, borderline grade 2, probably not grade 1. And you saw that by just the margin of victory. Unique Bella romped by more than 9. So, you know, we'll take out of this race what it is. She got the trip, and she was running against good but not great mares. But just the performance itself showed me a lot that Unique Bella really is ready to take it up a level. But then, of course, you got horses like Paradise Woods and Abel Tasman out west. You got horses like Forever Unbridled, the returning champion, and Elate, very highly regarded Mata, 4-year-old filly now out there in this division. Unique Bella will be a handful to beat, but I think this division, like you said, is loaded, and it should be fun to watch all year, as are all the big races. And I hope you continue to watch our recaps and our previews and our analysis on everything here on HorseCenter. We sure appreciate you coming every week. Subscribe to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation. And by all means, I want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Matt Schiffman, on this rainy morning from Louisville, Kentucky, can you shed a little light for me maybe, or for our audience, with a nice parting shot?
Well, Brian Zipsy, it's a pleasure doing the show with you, and the Derby Trail is heating up. We're into those 50-point races now. Those are winning your ins. So Risen Star, we'll see who's the first one to lock up a place in the gate. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman.
Brett's out of the gate, and the Risen Star winner will be in the Kentucky Derby gate. Good stuff, Matt. Thank you for watching HorseCenter. We'll be back next week. See you then.